Hi, I'm so excited to be here. So if you're here to learn about how to act like a Fortune 500 company, you are in the right place. I wanted to say hi to my virtual peeps out there. You're going to enjoy the presentation as well. So I want to start by talking about the B2B landscape. I know we're in the product sector today. We're on that track, and at some point, you're going to need to start selling your products, right? And most of you, if you're doing SaaS platform or something related to an app, you might be in a B2B setting, and so that's what I'm focusing on today. So I want to set the B2B landscape to put some of this in context so you can understand how to act like a Fortune 500 company. So I was at a Gartner conference, this was really interesting, and they talked about all of the things that are going on in our economy, external forces that obviously we can't control, but that are affecting the landscape that we're selling in. And they talked about this idea that macro change begets commercial change. And I think it's important to understand, I mean, we're paying attention to the news, we're watching the headlines, but it's important to understand how some of these things how you might take them into consideration when you're building a sales platform. In addition, I was reading a Forrester report lately, and they were talking about how companies are planning for 2023. And so we know that the economy is slowing. People are not using the R word recession, but we're probably in a recession. And one of the things I thought that was really interesting about the Forrester study was that they talked about how slower overall spending mixed with turbulent and lumpy employment trends will make it difficult to navigate 2023. But they asked their survey results, where do you think you're going to spend and what do you think is going to change? And the most interesting thing about the results is that in a recession, most organizations shrink their sales and marketing, right? That's what they do because they tend to be more disposable, theoretically. But in many instances, the respondents said, no, that's not necessarily where they're going to change. So I think this is interesting. In addition, they talk about the balancing act that we're all going to need to do to navigate the waters in the sales dynamic. And so to do that, Forrester's recommending in their study that they're thinking that organizations are going to need to invest in 3 key areas: technology, talent, and insight. And I really like this for 2 reasons. I think first, it makes it easier to understand in the mind of our consumer where the companies that we're selling to, where their head is at, where are they going to invest. And then as a founder like me, and as a small to medium-sized business, it might give us insight about where we need to invest, right? What we should be thinking about as we're moving into 2023 and beyond. So here's a concept I want to share with you about B2B sales. To me, it's like a snowflake, okay? A snowflake is complex, it's fragile, and it's super unique. So the B2B sales cycle is starting to feel this way. And the other interesting thing about a snowflake is that it's changing form over time as it's falling to the ground. And so I want to dissect this concept a little bit because I think it's interesting. So because it's become more complex, there are 4, this is from Gartner, there are 4 key areas that I think are affecting these longer tail sales, right? And part of it is process variability. So the actual process of creating a dynamic relationship with an organization in that sales is becoming more variable. There are more things, and obviously we talked about some of those internal factors. In addition, there are many key stakeholders. So it seems that the teams of decision makers are growing, which also leads to information dysfunction. So you're building a relationship with key individuals, and then more individuals are popping in, some individuals are popping out, right? So it's hard to understand who has the right information, the newest information, the information they need to make that key decision, because there are more key stakeholders in that decision-making process. And then all of that is leading to an extended buying cycle. So the process is getting a little longer. So what are we going to do? What do we do about that? Well, before we think about what we're going to do and acting like a Fortune 500, I want to dispel a myth. And if you were on the, I had a really great colleague who was here on the stage yesterday talking a little bit about this, and so I'm going to be in a little bit of differentiating from him. Everyone for the past 10 years in B2B has been talking about thought leadership, right? What we need to do is thought leadership. That's part of our sales process. And I'm going to say, wrong, wrong. It's not about thought leadership. So Gartner did a study in 2019. They did a study in 2020. They did a study in 2021. And what they're finding is when they talk to the people, again, that we want to sell to, our prospects and clients, that they're awash in really great, highly trustworthy information. And in the recent study, this went up to 91%. 91% of them agree that there is an amazing amount of trustworthy information available to them 365, 24/7 to make decisions. Well, what are we going to do? This is what we're supposed to be working on and thinking about, right? So in addition to that, I want to share some other stats from the study. So because there is a lot of trustworthy information, our clients and prospects are becoming very overwhelmed. They're increasingly overwhelmed. It rose to 75%. And in addition to that, it meant that the leadership is now really at parity, so it's almost commoditized. So what your competitors are doing is just as highly qualified as what you're doing, right? So how are they sifting and winnowing through all this information? It's difficult for them. And so what Gartner is saying is that there's sort of a tipping point. There's a point where our clients and prospects are just at a capacity overload. They can't take in any more information in order to help them make a decision. And so what happens then is when they continue as part of that buying cycle and then there's this overload, they start to then approach the decision-making process with various biases. And to me, the worst bias on this chart is the bias of status quo. Gartner has said that clients will wait years before they make a decision because they don't have the confidence to make the right decision. So we have to figure out how we're going to sell in this environment. So what I'm going to say today, one of the things I want to talk about is how we're going to fight the status quo, okay? Because doing nothing is much easier than making a bad or making a wrong decision. So let's talk about Fortune 500 companies. What do they have working for their advantage? How can we act more like them as a small to medium-sized organization? And my time today is meant to give you key takeaways. And wherever you are in your journey, no matter how you haven't founded yet, you're a young founder, you're 10 years old, I'm hoping that you'll have 1 to 2 key takeaways that you'll be able to adopt to start to do this today. So what I want you to look for is the little co. Within the presentation, my little co of my logo is going to have some of those key takeaways so you can find them along the way. So really, at the end of the day, Fortune 500 companies have scale, okay? They're big. They have scale. And that allows them to do certain things that you can't necessarily do if you're, like me, a solopreneur. So one of the things they have working to their advantage is they work with strategy first. We've heard a lot about this, right, over many of the amazing sessions we've had with Twin City Startup Week. So strategy first, tactics second. The second thing is that they craft strong processes and they create infrastructure for sales. And in doing so, then they layer on and leverage technology and automate workflows. They sell with stories and they really take social seriously. And I'm not talking about B2C, I'm talking about B2B. And they experiment with content. So I'm going to unravel some of these and unwrap them so we can learn how we can act more like Fortune 500. So some of you are probably familiar with the traditional sales funnel, right? So typically B2C, top down, a lot of numbers game, get them engaged, build awareness, and then you create a sale. But what I would argue is that in business to business, the sales funnel is really a bow tie, okay? It's a continuum. Because 80% of your revenue is going to come from your existing book of business and growing that organically. So acquisition is really important. But for a B2B organization, if you're a SaaS organization, it's going to be B2B, for example, 80% of your revenue is going to be continued sales. So that means that everyone on your team is actually selling. They are all contributing to the sales environment. And it's really going to be important when we talk about acting like a Fortune 500 later. So let's talk about marketing. I like to call this marketing, sales and marketing, right? That's one big key of what a Fortune 500 does. They have large sales and marketing teams, people who are dedicated to this. And I love this old graphic from Crispin and Porter, an ad agency, which has sales on one side, the guy, who does hitchhikes anymore, right? Guy hitchhiking, right? And then the marketing. So marketing is telling the story here, right? They're trying to go to moms for Christmas. Marketing is telling the story. But I would argue that the salesperson, is standing in the right place, the right time, on the right road for that customer to drive by, right? They're two sides of the same coin. And so the pros of a Fortune 500 company is that they have many people who are doing the work, and they're collecting data along the way, which is awesome. The cons is, unfortunately, then sometimes they get siloed and they get pitted together. So it's just something that we need to think about as we're growing. So as we're talking about that funnel, right, the acquisition funnel, or as it relates to retention as well, the thing I want to talk about that starts to be nuanced in a sales process as you scale is this idea of marketing qualified leads versus sales qualified leads, right? And as we move forward in sophisticated progress and evolution of our businesses, we need to start thinking more like this. So a marketing qualified lead is something where a person seems to fit your ideal target market, but they have not actually self-qualified or self-selected. So marketing is really in charge of building that awareness and interest, but what you really, as you become more sophisticated in your business, what you want to do is start tracking those qualified leads. People who are saying, I really want to have a conversation with you because you have something that's going to solve my problem, okay? So this is a really interesting example. So I was at a conference, and this is a company called Rev, and they launched a product with a huge database that helps organizations find more of their ideal targets. So if I were selling a cloud-based service, and I only used demographics, typical information that's out there about these companies, John Deere and Cat look exactly the same, okay? But if I layer on more information, and I look at the fact that Cat is actually more of an early adopter and not as B2C focused as John Deere, it would tell me that I need to spend more time trying to find companies like Cat, not John Deere. So that idea of defining your target market and not just using demographics that might be out there, but psychographics and other information that you might get by talking to other clients, talking to your existing clients, talking to lookalike clients to better understand that profile, means you're going to be more efficient. And that's really important when you're a small to medium-sized business. So now I want to talk about shifting your mindset. So we talked about Fortune 500s lead with strategy first and tactics second. Why do they do that? If you're familiar at all with Simon Sinek, he did a very famous TED Talk about 10, 11 years ago. It's had millions of views. He talks about Apple. He drew a bunch of circles, and he talks about why, how, and what, right? And he's got a great quote. So it's really important. Strategy is about choosing what not to do, in my opinion. It's about trying to create a laser focus about where you want to spend your time. And sometimes as a medium to small sized business, a startup or solopreneur like myself, that feels exclusionary. You don't want to say no to potential business. But what it does is it helps you become more effective. And if you layer on your why it's important, selling from your why, that's what people want to buy. People don't want to buy your how or your what. They want to buy your why. Why did you do this? We heard a really great session previously of an education robot toy that was trying to sell, they're selling their why, about changing childhood education. Tactics happen in silos, and they're very independent. They need to support that strategy, but at the end of the day, the tactics are not going to give you that why. So now I want to talk a little bit about leads versus pipeline, right? And as you get more sophisticated, my recommendation is to start thinking about how you can build a pipeline. It's a great infographic. I think this is amazing. So a lead is someone who really isn't qualified yet. It's someone that you're talking to, maybe someone who is reading information about you, someone that you've sent some information to, or they're reading your blog, or they're interacting with your social media, right? Lots of great tactics. But if you start to understand, some people call this a customer journey. If you start to understand your sales pipeline, you start to be able to understand how you interact. Remember those layers and all those key stakeholders, where are they? customers aren't predictable, right? And there's a lot of things going on in their own organizations. So they come in and out of your process at various times. And so if you start to map and understand that, you'll be able to then deliver when they want you to deliver information. So it's really important to think about beyond just tracking leads and revenue from sales, how you can become more sophisticated. Fortune 500 companies do this. And they understand where in the process their customers are along that journey. So why build a pipeline? Okay, what would be the pros of this? I've experienced this myself as a toddler. I'm a 2-year-old entrepreneur. So often in B2B, you start out, whether you're doing a product or service, and you have hopefully a lot of referral-based business. And then over time, that referral-based business is going to ebb and flow. And if you don't start building some infrastructure related to sales, then your sales are going to dip, and you can't continue to rely on those referrals. And so it's really key to start understanding how to transition and scale. And it overcomes some typical problems that small businesses have, but it's going to take a little bit of time and effort. It takes structure, skills, stability, and a little bit of specialization. You need to build that into your teams. So it could be that you're a solopreneur like me and you wear all the hats. But if you have lots of team members, I'd like to have you start thinking about switching your mindset, thinking about that B2B process that everyone is selling, your account executives are selling, the person who's sending out your invoice in a way is selling, right? They're all fulfilling a responsibility along that customer journey. And if that's the case, then shift the load so that maybe as an owner or 2 partners who typically sell, shift the load beyond just yourself in the sales mindset to help build that pipeline. It's happening whether you're thinking and conscious about it or not. So it's sometimes difficult to think about as you're building a team. Well, there might be attrition. I'm going to spend time investing in these individuals, building their sales skills, and they're going to take that away. Yes, that might happen, but at the end of the day, you're going to be a better organization for it because you're building that sales infrastructure. So we talked about that Fortune 500 companies like to leverage technology to help them automate their workflow. Well, why would we want to do this, right? And is it going to be super expensive? So I like to think about this as a martech stack. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that term, but tech stack, your product, a lot of product today is for the web or platform, again, or SaaS or an app. But if you think about marketing and sales tools, there are many options out there for consideration. And they help you deliver solutions for certain problems. And so there is a company, I'm going to give you that link in a second, or that, it's like I'm on social media, I'm going to give you that link. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But they fall, these products, when they work together, they fall into certain categories of problems that they solve. So sometimes it's about, they help you with advertising, they help you create content, they help you with project management, right? And so what I want you to think about if you're going to start adding tools to help create, save time, automate some of this, right, for you, in addition to leading with great content and strategy, is pick your pain point and start with that. What's the lowest hanging fruit? What's the thing that's troubling you the most? Pick that pain point and then find a product that's going to solve that first, instead of trying to do everything at once. So it can be overwhelming. In 2011, there were only 100 products available in a martech stack, right? There are apps, platforms that are going to help you with this. And in 2022 now, there's almost 10,000. 10,000 options. Where do you start? So this company, martech.com, has an incredible interactive tool. This is a snapshot of their interactive tool, where you can go and you can sift and winnow through unbelievable, all these 10,000 opportunities, and hover on the logo and find out information about what they do, who they are, how much they cost. So you can start to do some of that analysis for yourself, but you can do it with an understanding of, what do I need to solve first? Is it project management? I need better project management tools. I need better content creation tools. I need more creativity. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is that you don't need to pay for a lot of these programs. As a startup, a lot of these incredible programs are free. They have opportunities to upgrade as you grow and scale, but there are an amazing amount of tools that are free, many of which here I use. So for example, we've all heard, I'm sure, of Slack, right? Vimeo, that helps you create video. Google Analytics, it's going to give you a little bit of data. You can start with that for free based on your website. MailChimp and HubSpot, so now you're working on creating content and creating a CRM, a customer relationship manager, where you're interacting with and creating data, getting data for your customers. Hootsuite, Dropbox, Trello. These are all free products that are solving really incredible problems for organizations. So you can start small and build. Not everything has to cost a lot of money. If we're bootstrapping, it's really important. So now I want to talk about this idea that some of automation and martech stack can help you do. And again, this is kind of shifting your mindset as a founder. So it's this idea of outbound versus inbound, or push versus pull. So outbound marketing is something that every startup does, because before you open your doors or hang your shingle, you didn't exist. So you need to build awareness. You need to tell the world that you're out there and you're solving this problem. So outbound marketing is using tools that help you tell the world and build awareness that you exist. You're building your brand. But over time, particularly if you have something like a demo, you can start to switch to an inbound mindset, which is really about creating strategies and tactics that start to help your clients self-select, and now they're choosing you. So instead of spending all your time building content to push awareness out, now you can pull them into you, and you're being more efficient with your sales, with your time and your sales team. So if you shift from that, and it takes time and scale to do that, you're spending your time more effectively, and those leads are higher quality. Now, you still have to do all the work, right, to land the sale, give them the right information, but you're further along on that qualification pipeline. So one of the reasons why I think Fortune 500 and small to medium-sized companies should think about this idea of martech and push-pull is because the world as we live in from a sales, marketing, advertising perspective has changed dramatically. It used to be, back in the day, that it was very linear and there weren't that many channels available, right? And the company was in control. They were in control of the message. It was very linear to the customer and the end result. But as we all know, this is the landscape that we live in today, and there are literally tens of thousands of platforms available, right? And we're going to talk a little bit about, where you might need to be if you're B2B. But the customer is in control now of the information. And so part of the reason why I really thought the Gartner information on thought leadership was so important is because we do still want to create good content. We do still need to tell our prospects how our product or service works. But I think we need to reach them in a different way. And we need to think about, where are they, right? Where are they? Because they're in the center of this nebulous of all of these different strategies and tactics. So the other thing that we talked about from Fortune 500 is this idea of data-driven decisions. So they have a lot of people and tools that help them collect data that informs them and helps them make decisions along the way. We had an incredible session from Ovative yesterday about what they're doing in that space from a digital perspective, and how they're leveraging data to help clients make decisions across all the platforms that they work in. I really love this graphic. If you've never seen this graphic, it's this idea that data is like Legos. So you start with this really pile of mismatched Legos, and then you sort it, you arrange it, you present it visually. Hopefully you start to be able to have a visual story about what your data is telling you, so you can find a key insight. That helps you tell a story about your data, so you can explain it to other people, and then you hopefully then make it actionable. And then the joke here is that, and then management ignores it in a large company, and then it gets just completely thrown all over the floor, and you're really mad when you're walking across the floor at midnight and you step on a Lego, right? So we have to understand how to use data in a positive way, even from a small to medium-sized perspective. because data is important and it does matter. So what I would say as a key takeaway is that you don't want to collect data for data's sake, right? We talked about how much data is available and how much data is even collected on us as consumers. But it's important for you to start thinking about not necessarily what everyone talks about a KPI, what your key performance indicator is. It's important to think maybe beyond that, like what's the most valuable data for me and what's a single source? So I will say that the Fortune 500 siloed nature, sometimes they're not sharing data with each other. The other thing that happens is that if you're collecting data in the martech stack silo, they might not be talking to each other. So it can be challenging to try to understand what a single source of truth is, but it's great when you strive to get there, because then again, it gives you more insight information, particularly into the mindset of your consumer. That's who you're ultimately selling to. So you can get these key insights, and sometimes over time, you'll realize that my key performance indicator wasn't what I really thought it should be. Maybe it needs to be something else. And again, if you are sharing the load and the burden across your organization, and everyone along the way is contributing to that sales process, you're gonna need to talk to your team about what data they think is important. What are they seeing, right? So you don't act within a silo within your own organization, or maybe bringing your own biases to that data. So now I want to talk a little bit about how you might be able to show up differently. So one of the things that Fortune 500 companies do, even if they're in B2B, they start to really leverage social in an extremely powerful way. And I don't think everyone thinks about social and B2B together. And they use it strategically to tell stories. So, you know, some of us might be very heavy social users. Some of us might have said, I don't want to spend any time on social because it's a complexity to my life. But what it does do as a brand is it helps build awareness for who you are and keeps you top of mind. You know, and the other thing I like about social, depending on the platform that you're in, is that you have an opportunity to actually get the point of view of your consumer. So when they're engaging with you or your content, you're starting to better understand what's resonating with them. And that's a free. If you're paying attention, you're not necessarily having to pay for any of that data, which is really important. Because at the end of the day, B2B is a relationship-based process. That's what the sales process looks like. So if you have more information about what's going on in the mind of your consumer, you know, you can apply that. The other thing I really like about social, and I think that big corporate, Fortune 500 is really embraced, is that they're taking more of an authentic, personal, they're showing up with personality. So they're not necessarily always just posting stats about their organization, but they're trying to build authentic relationships with their customers as well. And here, I think you should think about this as, you know, everyone talks, we're on product track today, minimally viable product, right, MVP. So let's think about social from an MVP perspective. And just start with one key property. Start with a property where you know your clients or prospects are. You have data, you know they're there. Their eyeballs are there, that's where they're gonna show up, so you wanna be in their feed, okay? And just dive really deeply and get really good at that platform. You do not need to be in every platform at the same time. So for example, I started with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great platform if you're B2B because it's really for professionals. And I'm sure you've seen that change over time, right? More personality is starting to come out. I'll have some examples, right? So, and then I moved from that and I added Instagram. So, you know, it's about understanding how to do one thing well and getting that data, and then you can apply that. So here are some examples of how corporate Fortune 500 is using social media. So I love this, you know, the story of a lot of people are talking on LinkedIn now about how they didn't think what their future could have looked like and what it looks like now based on some changes that they've made. Maybe that was based on COVID, maybe that's based on the Great Resignation, a lot of things externally, right, impacting this. But it's really interesting to see the kind of the behind the scenes. And I love this, Netflix, don't give up on your dreams. We started with DVDs. I just think that there's an opportunity for a sense of humor if that aligns with your brand, if that makes sense for your customers. And I really think that there's a big opportunity in TikTok for B2B. And some of you are gonna be like, oh my God, TikTok, I don't wanna do like dance reels on TikTok. Like that's not gonna match my brand. Well, there's a growing business platform for TikTok. The only thing that I will say about that, again, make sure your customer is there, you know, and it could be that they are. But caveat, China owns the information, so FYI, you might want to think about that from a business perspective. Twitter's done some amazing things outside of what's going on legally with Twitter, the things that are in the headlines in the news. From a business-to-business perspective, Twitter is starting to really, corporate is starting to really leverage imagery and that storytelling of data on Twitter. Typically it was really about news and information, but for example, there are some great examples here about they're telling really quick visual stories about data, something important that's going on with their company. And then again, there's Insta. If you're highly visual, or if your consumers that you're targeting are in a highly visual business, let's say architecture, right? That's a highly visual business. That's very photographic. Or if the process by which you create your product or service is interesting, Insta is an incredible platform for you to tell your story because it's about visual. So it's the opposite of thinking about Twitter, which is really about these short text bursts and feeds of information. This is where you can tell a longer, almost like back of the house story. And you can, because there are stories now, you can tell journeys. There are journeys that are happening. And it's a way for your customers to get to know you again on their own terms without you pushing out thought leadership about your process, right? It's a different way of using that information. So things to keep in mind, I've said this, make sure that your consumer really is, whatever tactic that you pick, you know they're there. If you don't know that yet because you're just starting and you have no idea, do some trial and error, right? Like based on what I know about my consumer, I think they're there. Over time, maybe a month, if they're not engaging, they're not there, then you can try something else. It's not like you cannot repurpose that content. That's the great thing about using social. You can create content and then repurpose it across many platforms, so you can still stay efficient. I want to make sure that I'm keeping that idea in mind as a small to medium-sized business, because you have a limited amount of time to do this. So, I talk fast because I'm really enthusiastic about sales, and I want to talk through the key takeaways if I didn't hit them along the way. So, what are Fortune 500 companies great at? They're great at strategy, they're great at getting that infrastructure created for their sales process, leveraging technology and automating workflows so they're more efficient, but they're also collecting data along the way when they do that. And they're experimenting with content on social by telling stories. So we can all do that today. We can start doing that today. So although the B2B landscape is looking pretty cray-cray right now, and there's a lot of external forces that we're all dealing with across the globe that are affecting how our clients and prospects are making decisions and how we have to make decisions as business owners, I think that you can fight the status quo by really starting to do one thing and focusing on one thing, right? Just try to do one thing at a time and try to nail that really well. When it comes to sales and marketing, I'm not saying that you're not doing many more things as you're running your business. But fighting that status quo and getting into that fight the status quo mindset, I think is really important. And maybe in order to do that, you want to invest in technology, talent, and some insight. Based on that Forrester study, that's what they said. So in addition to that, I think if you think differently a little bit about the B2B sales cycle, and that it is this bow tie, it's a continuum of people. As you're building and growing organic growth, those on the retention side, those clients are then going to become advocates and refer you. That is the best way to build business over time, but you still need to think about acquisition and that everyone on your team is selling, whether you're consciously programming that into your daily operations or not, they're contributing to that customer journey. So defining and understanding what your ideal target market is going to help you understand where you need to play. And sometimes you need more data like Cat versus John Deere to help you better understand who your ideal client really is. I think it's really interesting when you lock in what happens. I personally have been working on that this summer, really trying to lock in, and I feel like it's an explosive growth because now I really know who I'm talking to and what they need from me. So tactics are easy. It's easy to just pick something and go. Finding and articulating your why is hard. But I think that, as Simon Sinek says, people are buying your why. They're not buying the how or the what. It's not to say that it's not important that the how or what you do contributes to the solution, but really at the end of the day, they're buying your why. And if you develop this process or pipeline, and you're starting basically with the lowest hanging fruit, what worked? If you do have clients, if you've launched, and you have revenue, and you look back and say, how did I get that client? What was that experience like? Ask your clients, particularly if you're early in your company, they want you to succeed. Ask them, well, what worked? What did I say, what did I do that convinced you that I was the right solution? That's gonna be gold. Mine that gold all day long. In addition, I think if you want to build that business development culture, as an owner, if you have a team and you encourage people to share the load, it's not all on you, right? There's a lot of decision making that has to happen when you're a small to medium-sized business. If you share the load, it really creates an incredible new lift and energy. And you're giving skills to your employees and your team members that they may not have had in another situation. And I think that's really amazing. So if you're going to start to leverage martech, right, make sure you think about strategy first and tactics second, and that it's going to solve that problem. Whatever that key problem is, solve that problem today, then move on to another problem. And maybe that's not with a tool. Maybe it's something else. But there are obviously a lot of tools available, and you can do the research to see who's out there, and you can start for free. Don't collect data for data's sake. Right? It's easy sometimes to get into it. If you're right and left brain like I am, I really like to crunch the data and be in a spreadsheet and see if I can figure out what the correlation and the causation is, but that may not be the best use of your time if you're running a business as a business owner. So make sure you understand what, maybe establish a KPI and then double check that, do a gut check with the information that you're getting along your sales and marketing pipeline. And then, experimentation is really the best way. I mean, we're on the product track. It's all about experimentation, right? Test and validate, getting that to the MVP. Well, the sales and marketing is the same way. You test and validate with your prospects and your consumers what's working and what's not. So I truly believe that it is possible to act like a Fortune 500 company and get the same great results that they do. So I am finished with this, and I would love to take questions if anyone has any questions. No questions. Oh, there's a question. What barriers do you have, I think for the virtual peeps at home, they want to. What are the biggest barriers? Oh, sorry.
Is that better? Okay. What are the biggest barriers that you find, especially really small, early on founders kind of wrapping their head around the need for strategy in some of these things? What are the tactics that you found as a consultant or as an agency working with them that are most helpful to get you to wrap around thinking about being a big company?
Sure. Well, innately, if you're a founder, you have a vision for an idea, right? Innately, it's who you are as a founder. That's what it means to be an entrepreneur. You have this vision for what something can be, and you're going to take on risk to realize what that vision is. The hardest part is, I think, and for me as well, is taking the time just to write that down and define it in a way that can be easily replicated in different scenarios, right? It's about taking the time to do it because you're thinking about how to get it launched and how to get it up and who do I need, right? So it's taking that step back and documenting that why. Everybody's got it, right? It's easier for an entrepreneur to do it than a Fortune 500 company to do it because they've been in business forever, right? General Mills probably is like, what's our why? So it's that. And then it's feeling like you have to have everything lined up. I think we think that we have to have everything lined up before we start. No, if your product is minimally viable, then your sales and marketing should be that too, right? So you don't have to have everything lined up. Test and verify. Not everything is going to work. I've done a ton of stuff already in my 2 years. I'm like, yep, not going to do that anymore. Yep, not going to spend money there. That didn't work. But now I can move on to something else. So being able to rapidly move, figure out why it didn't work, then move on. I think those two things are really key. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody else? No? Well, I want to say thank you to, QR code was going to go there for Trust Mary. I want to say thank you to Twin Cities Startup Week for allowing someone like me to have a platform to talk to all of you. It's super exciting. And If you want more from me, you can text 66866, and you can schedule a 30-minute follow-up one-on-one. I would love to talk to all of you. Thank you very much.